up YouTube, it's your girl AK and we are back with another video. Today we are talking about front-end developers versus a back-end developer versus a full-stack developer. What the heck are those things? So this video is mostly for my beginners who are just getting into software developing or want to get into the field, and you're trying to figure out what is a front-end developer, what is a back-end developer. You keep hearing these terms, but you're not really sure what it is. Or maybe you have an idea, but you really need a better understanding of what fits better for you. I'm going to break down what a front-end developer and what a back-end developer does so you can have a better idea for yourself, and it'll be easier on your decision-making process. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Okay, so the front-end developer. What is a front-end developer? The front-end developer is very design-orientated. So when I say design-orientated, they're more focused on the client side. The client side is everything that the user sees. It's what the people see, it's what the people interact with. For example, this can include online shopping, scrolling through Instagram, or reading a blog post. Things that the user can click, interact with, drag, any different animations that show up on the front side. That is what a front-end developer focuses on. So when it comes to front-end development, a lot of the jobs that the developer focuses on is the page structure, making sure that the page is very fast and optimal. So not only are they worried about the design of the front end, but they're also worried about, is it responsive? Does it load fast enough, right? Is it built in a way where it is acceptable to a user? They're very focused on the user experience. As well as the user experience, they also deal with SEO stuff, right? So SEO is your search engine optimization, to basically help gain traction to the web page. So traditionally, something called an API, which is a application programming interface. I talked about it in a previous video. If you want to learn more about it, you can go watch it. But traditionally, an API is used between the front end and the back end developer, where it sends information between the two, right? But the front-end developer still needs to be very aware of how an API works, because the front-end developer will need to use the API to grab information and display it for the user. So for example, let's say you are shopping for shoes on a certain site, right? And you want to see how much the certain shoe item costs. So as you can see, you're scrolling and you see the price tag is right below the shoe. So that price is actually being pulled from an API. And the front-end developer job is to make sure it's displayed nicely and accurately for the user to see. So here's some very common languages that a front-end developer will use: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. More experienced users tend to learn TypeScript, which is a variation of JavaScript. It's basically a Microsoft version of JavaScript that is a strongly typed language. It's a bit more difficult to learn. However, in the long run, you have less errors with debugging and figuring out issues with the code. So I highly recommend learning TypeScript if you have the time. Along with those popular languages, you also have your popular frameworks. We talked about it in the past. You have React, you have Angular, Vue.js, jQuery. Those are just 4 very popular front-end frameworks that you can learn. Okay, so we talked about the front end, but what is the back end, right? What does a back end developer do? Back end development is very logic oriented. Back end basically works with the server side. The server side is the things that the user cannot see. It's the invisible things, right? It's basically, think of like a house where you have an electrician. The back end developer is the electrician. You can't really use the house. You can't use your TV or your blender or things of that nature if you don't have any power. It has to be wired up. So the back-end developer is who does all that wiring, right? So you can interact with all those front-end facing things. So the back-end is where the logic is happening, right? This is where we are executing all of the commands, and this is where we are interacting with our database. So for an example, when you are, again, on that shopping site and you're trying to shop for your new shoes, when you are actually clicking and adding those shoes to your shopping cart, that action of adding that item to that list of things you want to buy is a back-end action. Another example is when you're scrolling on Instagram, when you decide to actually take a picture and post it and upload it to Instagram, that interaction of posting that picture is another back-end action. So when it comes to APIs within the back-end developer is actually the person who creates the API, right? So they create different things called endpoints, right? Where they can get data for the user, where they can post data for the user, update data for the user, delete, etc. So overall, the duties of a back-end developer makes up of basically planning and shaping up the architect of the entire application, creating the APIs, and handling or transferring that data that they receive from the API from the user. A backend developer also handles security things as well as authorization and authentication of a user. Now, sometimes the backend developer does handle database things such as like maintaining, creating, and structuring. There's also something called a database administrator whose specialty is to do those things, right? So that is like a sometimes backend job. I don't want to say that it always will be that. It depends on your job, it depends what they want you to do, your manager, what they expect you to do. But a lot of times you have a database administrator that does database things. So I'm not gonna say it's always correlated, but sometimes as a backend developer, you can see yourself doing database related things. So as a backend developer, you actually have the privilege to use a lot of different type of languages depending on what you're working with, right? So instead of just only being limited to JavaScript, you get a big variety of kind of what you get to use. So you have Python, you have Java, you have C#, you have Ruby. And if you're doing database related things, SQL is also important to know as well as a backend developer. So picking one of those languages and then also SQL was probably what you're gonna be looking at as a backend developer. So some popular backend developer frameworks is ASP.NET for our C# users. You have the Django for our Python users. You have Spring Boot for all of our Java users. Ruby on Rails if you are coding in Ruby. And if you just do not want to learn any of those languages and you still want to use JavaScript on the back end, you actually can. You can use Express. Express is a JavaScript backend framework where you can use JavaScript on the front end as well as the back end. If that's your cup of tea, hey, go for it. It's there for you to use. Okay, and lastly, we talked about the front end and the back end, but what the heck is a full stack developer? To keep things very simple and not confusing, think of the full stack developer as the jack of all trades. So the full stack developer needs to have a keen sense for problem solving as well as a very great eye for design and looking at different UI patterns. Since the full stack developer does both front end and back end tasks, basically what they do is a lot more broad, right? And they can be pulled and used in a lot of different categories. Being a jack of all trades can be very useful for your company or yourself if you're interested in like doing startup things, or if you're just interested in about learning all different sides of web development or application development in general. Now, while being a jack of all trades is a good thing, remember that when you're a jack of all trades, it kind of limits your potential to be a master at one thing. You need to decide what is more important to you. Would you rather be a master at one particular thing, or would you rather have good general knowledge of basically everything regarding to application development? But at the end of the day gotta end. No, I'm just playing.
At the end of the day gotta end.
Regardless, you need to figure out what is best for you. Are you more of the design central person, or are you more of the logic central person, or are you good at both and you want to take a stab of doing both things? Personally, I am considered a full stack developer, so I do both front end and back end stuff as well as database things, right? I touch everything, right? I just like to have a great understanding of how the entire application works. So that is why I am a full stack developer. So what kind of developer are you? Are you the front end developer? Are you the back end developer? Or do you like to do a little bit of both, right? Comment down below what kind of developer you are. I would love to see your comments. I'm just very curious to see what you're interested in. If you have any questions more about front end, back end, full stack, or any other roles regarding to application development in general, I just scratched the surface. There's so many other different type of roles that I did not talk about, but if you would like to learn more about different roles, go ahead and comment down below what you would like to learn about, and I will be happy to talk about it in the next video. Again, I hope y'all have a great, amazing, blessed day. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like this video, make sure you like it. If you are new, consider hitting the subscribe button to join the family, and hit the bell icon to get a notification for every time I post. I hope this video was helpful. Until next time, guys. Bye.